Breaking news from baseball and bad news for the Rangers. Max Scherzer's season is likely done. Rangers general manager Chris Young telling reporters today that Scherzer's going to miss the rest of the regular season and likely the postseason with a strain in a muscle that connects his throwing arm to his shoulder blade. Scherzer 4-2 in 8 starts with the Rangers after coming over in a trade with the Mets back in July. Rangers in action tonight against the Blue Jays. They've won 4 in a row, and they're only a game behind the Astros in the division. Currently hold the second wild card spot, but only a half game of wiggle room there between them and missing the postseason. About 18 games to go. So let's get Jim Bowden in here. Jim, familiar with this injury because Justin Verlander had the same thing that kept him out the first month or so of the regular season. So would you say this is likely season ending?
Well, it's definitely regular season ending. As you mentioned, Chris Young telling me about 15 minutes ago that the regular season over for him for sure. He didn't completely shut the door on the postseason, but I don't think there's any question that they're looking at this thing 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. So if in fact the Texas Rangers were able to get to the World Series, is there an outside shot he might be able to pitch then? Yeah, they're not going to eliminate that. In all probability, his season is over, though. It is the major teres muscle that is strained. Strained is also another word for a slight tear. That is the injury. So we know it's going to be a while, 4 or 5 weeks, something like that. It is low grade. He is not going to need surgery, according to them. Now, what does this mean for the Texas Rangers? Well, this is a team that had a lot of momentum going into today. They had won 4 games in a row. And about a week ago, they were out of the playoffs, and now all of a sudden they're right back in the middle of this thing. But they are in a very tight race, not only for the division with the Houston Astros and Seattle Mariners, but they're also in a race with the Toronto Blue Jays, of which one of those 4 teams isn't going to make the playoffs. One of them is going to go home. And so that's what's going to be fascinating here. How much of an impact will Scherzer have? Now, this has been a year of injuries for the Rangers, right? You lost Jacob deGrom with Tommy John early in the season. And Nathan Eovaldi missed a lot of starts with that forearm strain. He is now back. Adolis Garcia has gone on the injured list. Josh Young had a fractured thumb. They're hoping he can come back at some point here before the season ends. So they've had to deal with a lot of injuries. And this was a team that had the best record in baseball for a lot of the first half of the season. But this injury is devastating. And if they're going to overcome it, it means that Nathan Eovaldi, Dane Dunning, John Gray in this starting rotation are going to have to step up and pitch extremely well. But this is absolutely devastating news to the Texas Rangers. Given the situation that they're in, yes, an opportunity to win the division, but wild card teams are all stacked up right there. And as you said, one of these teams is going to miss the postseason. There aren't enough slots. How likely would you say it is now that they don't make the playoffs? Well, I think I'll give you 50-50 is the way I'm going to look at it. I'm going to take actually Houston and Seattle to finish ahead of them. I think the injury to Scherzer is significant enough with the other injuries they've dealt with. I think they're now the 3rd best team in the division, and I think it's 50-50 with the Toronto Blue Jays. I think one's going to get in and one's not going to get in. But remember, this is a Rangers team over the last month. They've had one of the worst bullpens of all contending teams. And one of the strengths has been their starters have kept them in games until they go to the bullpen. But to lose Max Scherzer, because this is a guy that gets deep into games. He can pitch 6 innings or 7 innings when he's healthy. And that's a big blow because that means whoever replaces him probably is going to go 4 or 5 innings. That puts more strain on the bullpen, which has been their kryptonite all year long. But they have won 4 in a row. They have the guy that's going to finish second in the MVP voting in Corey Seager behind Shohei Ohtani. So they've got Marcus Semien as their superstar. So they're going to be in this race to the end. But I think instead of making the playoffs, it's now going to probably come down to the last weekend, and this is a big blow for them. If they don't get him back, even in the postseason, Jim, can this team get to a World Series without him? I don't think they can this year. I don't. But I do think they are built for next year. And I know Ranger fans don't want to hear that when you're in a race and you've been as good as they have been all year. But think of this. You're going to get DeGrom back next year. Scherzer's not going to need surgery. He'll be back. And I'm being told the Texas Rangers are going to make a huge run for Shohei Ohtani. Imagine next year Ohtani in their lineup with Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, what that would look like with Adolis Garcia and Josh Young. So they have a real good core in place, not just for this year, but for the immediate future as well. A lot of excitement in Texas, but again, they still got a chance to get in. I don't see without Scherzer a pathway for this team to get to the World Series.
Again, as Jim pointed out, it's a muscle that connects the throwing arm to the shoulder. He's going to be 40 years old next year. What should be expected from a guy that uses his power? Is this something that could hinder him going forward as well because of his age?
I don't think the injury will. I think he'll overcome the injury. No one's going to work harder on rehab than he is. And I would expect Tom Brady out of Max Scherzer. You know, the beginning of the year, we looked at him and said, uh-oh, is he getting old? Do we see decline here? And then all of a sudden he found his slider. And all of a sudden he came back and looked like an ace, got traded to Texas, goes over to Texas and looks like an ace. And then he had a forearm injury. And now, of course, we have this shoulder injury as well. So he's had some injuries. But when Max Scherzer's healthy, do I still think he has enough left for one more year? I'm not talking about winning a Cy Young or finishing top 5 in Cy Young, but does he have enough left to still be a 12 to 15 game winner? Absolutely, I think he will.
Really disappointing for the Texas Rangers, who lost Jacob deGrom earlier in the season. So then they went out and they traded for Max Scherzer at the deadline, and now he's done for the regular season and most likely the postseason as well, unless they make a really deep run. Our Jim Bowden with us here breaking the news on CBS Sports HQ. Rangers in playoff position right now. They would have the second wild card if everything ended right now. This is how the season concludes. They have game 3 of a 4-gamer at the Blue Jays tonight. Then they go to Cleveland, back home for the Red Sox and Mariners, and then 2 more road series in Anaheim against the Angels and at the Mariners, which could be monstrous. 2 of the last 3 series against the Seattle Mariners, who are right there with them in that wild card race.